Hi, everyone. My name is Kadzai Chigiji, and I'm the CEO of Ovation Solutions. And I have our CEO and founder, Calvin Mayo, with us today. And we'll be talking to you about what we're seeing in the employee benefit space and how Ovation Solutions was built to solve a lot of the pain points that we've witnessed in the industry, both locally and across the globe. And I'll hand over to our CEO and founder, Calvin, to tell you a bit more about his journey at this point.
Thank you, Kutsai. So basically I was working overseas as a consultant for a lot of the big blue chip consulting firms. And as luck would have it, I was spending quite a bit of my time just before I came back to South Africa working on systems similar to Ovation. And got back to South Africa in 2012, only to find that there was nothing like that here. And then again, maybe fortuitously, ended up working with people in the industry again. We started talking about how things are very different overseas and that type of stuff. And me having the software design and architecture background that I have, decided to go off and start building. Except this time I wasn't building for a brokerage or a broking house. I was actually building it with a slightly different twist. I wanted to solve for normal people, for members like me, and enrolled in a program with Microsoft who helped us out with some funding. Graduated out of that. I actually ended up doing a stint at Microsoft, showcasing what Ovation was doing with their tech, including Azure and Azure DevOps and that type of thing. And the rest is kind of history. It's snowballed from there, and we have a member first focused platform out there in the market today.
Fantastic. Okay, so you talk a bit about coming to South Africa and not seeing a competitive solution in the market, and really wanting to build something that was customer focused. What about the employee experience around benefits really triggered that? Aside from the fact that there wasn't a product here, what informed how you were going to develop this any differently from what you'd seen before, based on your experiences here?
Well, first and foremost, I've had 3 jobs since being back in the country, and each and every one of them landed me with a stack of paper on my first day. One of them even has this induction day that's actually just a paperwork day. And it's repetition, and it's the same details going to different brokers or different product houses. Stuff gets lost. You end up having to repeat some pieces. With pensions, you're making changes and things get lost. In the time that I've been back, I've had to go to the ombudsman twice to get things rectified, simply because of paperwork being lost. Won both times, I'll tell you. And I know we can do better. I know there's tech out there. I know that there's like-minded people. I know the industry wants to change. They just find it quite difficult, I would think. And we can provide some solutions to help. And it was based on that and the fact that because we know we can do things better, why are we just not doing something? And the big why is, I don't know why no one else did anything, but we did. We got up and decided to start building. Our approach was very different to what I'd been doing previously. Having worked primarily on these systems for a broker house or a product house, they tend to be very driven by their KPIs or their measures of success, mostly revenue generating. So there's very little that gets done for the yous and me's of the world to make our lives easier, or information being surfaced in a way that actually makes sense to me, for me to make better decisions. So, Ovation's mantra has always been member first, and we want to be affecting those outcomes more than these types of platforms have done in the past, or at least the ones I've worked on in the past.
Okay. I mean, just thinking about what you're saying about being member focused and really catering to the needs of the end user, it makes me think a lot about the gig economy. It makes me think a lot about small businesses, where I can imagine, we've worked in very large organizations where we're probably getting much better service than the average man on the street, because of, the broker fees involved. But you can think about the people really drive growth of our economies, not just in South Africa, but the broader African economy. And it makes you wonder, are they adequately taken care of? We look at things like insurance penetration across the continent, and particularly outside of South Africa, it's extremely low. And it makes you wonder, is it because products are being developed and platforms are being developed and the technology is geared towards brokers and not the end users? And definitely, I guess from our conversations with clients across the Southern African region, what we're hearing from West Africa and parts of East Africa, there is a genuine hunger and desire for small business owners and people in the gig economy to secure their finances, to build wealth with the use of these products, but it just seems that they're just not accessible, both in getting information and also the costs involved in being able to access this information and the products. So I think, as we've been taking the product to market, that's something that's been very clear to me, is that ultimately, we also need to think beyond just the large corporations of South Africa. We also need to think about the people who really drive growth in our economies. And this is a big problem. I won't underestimate the size of the problem, because when we think employee benefits, I think a lot of people immediately think big pension fund and, very expensive medical cover. And it's everything. It's all your
lack of
healthcare.
choice, lack of flexibility, all that stuff.
It's all of it. And we can't talk about financial literacy. We can't talk about wealth creation. We can't talk about financial health if we don't talk about employee benefits. And I think one of the challenges also for the layman on the street is that employee benefits is such a broad term. And if you think about it, if let's take someone working in a large bank based out of Sandton out of the equation, the average person who is looking to have health cover, who's looking to put aside money for retirement, who's looking to have some money in some unit trusts and have some supplementary healthcare cover in addition to their medical savings, it's essentially your cradle to grave products that help you sustain your life, right? And so if we say that, we're trying to create the future of benefits, it's not just for these large corporations, it's for every single person. And so this is a big problem. It's a big challenge, and it definitely has potential right across the continent. And what I want to ask you is if maybe you can share a bit more about what those ambitions look like going forward, because, we've spoken to the good and the great of South Africa, but what happens beyond the borders of the good and the great here?
Well, it's quite a lot in what you said there. So I just want to unpack some of it a bit more. The accessibility is most certainly an issue. We kind of take it for granted. You mentioned the big Sandton corporate and that type of thing. Sure, they get a lot of stuff, but it's the accessibility around what that is. Even for that Sandton corporate, half of them won't know how much they're putting away for their pension. Half of them are begrudgingly in the medical aid because they would prefer to be on another medical aid. All that. No one knows what they're paying for anything, or worse yet, what you actually get for that money. And the broker behind this is there, but as an employee, very hard to get hold of. It's always through HR, etc. So Evasion's kind of been put in the middle as this nexus to bring all these different people in the value chain together, to remove that friction in these relationships, and also to use the insights and stuff that we actually generate through the platform and all the different interactions to help each person or help each organization on this value chain derive more value. And that's insights to brokers, insights to companies, even insights to the actual member about what's going on, how he can compare himself, etc., etc. But the end goal here is more about exactly what you were saying, that cradle to grave thing. So I might be introduced to products through my employer, but when I leave, they're still mine. Why does my access to a tool like Ovation stop? Why am I now all of a sudden I have to revert to paper? I have to revert to the old school way of doing stuff because it's cheap for the product house, maybe? I don't know. But we don't want to have that type of situation. We want to capture people in terms of helping them with their financial plan, bringing these employee benefits more into the fray. Because a lot of people, the only benefits they have are their employee benefits. Only when you start getting older do you sometimes have a little bit more of this and a little bit more of that. But in the meantime, what about those people? So choice is also limited. And I like to think, choice is probably limited because of the admin involved around offering that choice. It's much better to find a middle of the road pension fund. It's a much easier to choose a middle of the road default option for medical or whatever. But that doesn't suit everybody. And in today's day and age, to not personalize that experience or not allow it to be personalized for me as a person, I just lose interest. And that's why people they know they're paying deductions on their payslip. They'll probably can't tell you how much it is because they've stopped caring. They don't care about their 40-page fund sheet that comes out for their pension because they can't tell what it means to them as a person. And those, it sounds simple, but those are the areas we attack very, very hard in Ovation. We want someone to look at this pay or look at our pages and go, well, this is me. This is where I am. Be able to reach out and touch that broker. Be able to ask the right questions. And I've always firmly believed that I don't think Ovation can solve the world's problems here, but we can get the member asking the right questions. We can get him asking for the right advice. You don't know what you don't know, right? So unless something tells you that you, Kutsai specifically, are in the red, you're not going to do anything about it because you're not going to know. And, when we talk about like the big corporates and that type of thing, sure, they also have their platforms, which is great. But all of those are internal facing. So it's looking inside. And unless you have everything with a discovery, for example, unless you have absolutely every product with them, that website is largely useless to you. In a company, you can have 5, 6, 7 brokers, and I'm not talking about a big company. There's just an array of different products that get offered. There's 1 or 2 brokers behind each product sometimes. And me as the employee, it kind of gets like, well, why does that complication have to matter to me? I just want to be able to use these things, understand how to use them at least, fit them into the rest of my financial plan, and maybe be offered something else that's potentially useful to me. Reach out for advice when and as I need it, rather than funneling everything through HR and, heaven forbid HR gives pensions advice.
Which happens.
Which happens, and these days can land you in jail, so don't do it. So we put ourselves in the middle there to try and, like I say, ease all this communication that has to go on, information that has to flow, and experiences that matter to everyone in that value chain. It's another big difference between how I developed Ovation versus some of the other platforms is no one on that value chain has a lesser experience. All of their experiences are important to Ovation. So it's why we partner with a whole bunch of people up and down that value chain to actually bring that experience to the members.
Okay, fantastic. So, I mean, you've spoken about a few things that, I was going to ask individually, but you've brought them together quite nicely. Firstly is how we've developed Ovation differently from our competitors across the globe. I mean, it's great that, the person leading the charge with innovation has seen what the other platforms look like, has built some of the other platforms. So you definitely have come with your wisdom as to how to make sure that member experience really shines. And I think, one of my first exercises in really trying to understand the mission and the vision that you had was understanding what our competitive landscape looked like. Looked in the US, looked in the UK, Nordic countries, went up and down sort of the globe to see what else was out there. And I will say that of the member experiences I've seen, I do believe Ovation provides one of the richest ones in terms of available, like access to the range of benefits and the level of information that's provided. And one thing we've always spoken about is like, we can't make all the decisions for people, but we can make information a lot easier to understand, to digest, and make it easier for people to make the right decisions for them. And something we've both spoken quite passionately about with our customers, particularly our the service providers, is never assume that people are dumb. Never assume that people don't know how to manage their own money. A lot of the issues around financial literacy have to do more so with understanding the jargon. But you'd be surprised how many low-income earners are building houses, sending their kids to school, and probably have better credit rating than most of the high net worth or wealthy individuals. So
of course, and why should they be left out of the conversation? 100%.
Yeah, it's if we as an industry can't make money without screwing people over, then perhaps we need to rethink how we do business. And that's been quite core to I think our philosophy. Another thing you mentioned, and we've experienced it time and time again, also with service providers, is how is this different from what we are offering our members? And I think it's quite important, that point that you teased out. What happens when the person doesn't have all their benefits with you? What happens when they retire? What happens when they leave jobs, they move country?
Mm.
How do they access all their information? We have many family friends who still get, who are retired and still get letters in the mail telling them what their statement for the month is like in 2021.
Yeah,
In
yeah. Well,
2021.
it's a big thing, right? So, I mean, a lot of providers we're talking to, can offer that continuation of cover. But because you're relying on HR to do it, if it means more work, chances are it's not going to get done. Legislation's having to change to help people understand that they actually have preserve options and, those types of things for their pensions. But in many cases, those things have actually been there. They've always been an option. They're now just they've been made mandatory. But I can't remember being offered any of these things when I've left roles. And providers have got decent enough products out there. They're not being fully elaborated to the people that actually have them. So once again, we put the provider in control to let him dictate the message that goes to his members. The broker's there to do the servicing of that member, and everyone's interests are taken care of. And to your earlier point, there's more than enough money washing around the system. We don't need to, go and impoverish one segment to actually deliver this type of thing. There's enough for us to do it properly, to do it honestly, to do it transparently, and for everybody to win. I think, there's a lot of distrust in the industry, especially if you look at like pension savings and that type of stuff. We all have those stories of the poor person who got to retirement and now can't retire and has to go and work in a market or whatever to supplement his income, etc. It's real. There's a real human cost here. And it's not to say he didn't do anything wrong, but he didn't get the right advice along the way. Especially if he thinks he did everything right and he was maximizing his savings and why didn't he get there? And then they drive past the buildings of these big companies and look at their buildings and think, well, I can't retire, but look at this building. That type of stuff. And the distrust is the distrust, right? Hopefully it's changing. The more providers I see that integrate with us already starts changing that, to my view. As much as you might want to capture the entire person's wallet, group life, PHI, savings, whatever, that's not always the best advice. Sometimes the best advice is a bit of a mixture. And how do I, as a member, pull all that together? Well, I have 5 logins or 8 logins at different websites and I've got to do the work myself. Come on, that's not a solution either. So that's where Ovation sits, right? We don't push product. We don't advertise or anything like that. We don't align ourselves with any one provider or any broker. We cross industry. We are literally there for the member, and as I mentioned, to facilitate that communication that needs to happen for us to improve member outcomes.
Yeah, and I think something that, well, particular word you've said several times is just trust. And I was telling you, I took a course on trust in the digital age out of curiosity to see, what was this all about. And I've had some time to reflect on what my sort of almost subconscious indicators for trust are, particularly when you can't meet people and so on, quote unquote, look them in the eye. How do you build trust with the service provider or financial advisor or a broker or an employer? It's how much information they provide you, so their level of transparency, the number of options they give you. People don't want to feel like they're being sold to. And I suspect that particularly people in my generation and much younger are as we enter the market and start buying a lot more of our own financial products, we're going to want a lot more information than is currently available. We're going to want a lot of our own options. We want to be able to access this information on platforms where, again, we don't feel like we're being sold to. And that's becoming more and more important. And to your point, a lot of these stories, well, people ask, okay, why don't more people save in traditional banks or buy these products? It's because people have had bad experiences. It's not for stupidity's purpose. It's not because they're financially illiterate. They've heard of stories of people not getting the right information and therefore not being able to make good decisions. So that distrust is not completely irrational, and it, as we build out Ovation, it's something that I know we're both very passionate about, is to make sure that people always have the information they can make decisions based on. And also, to your point, if I need to sit down and log into 8 different websites at least once a month to keep a running,
You're not going to do it.
people are just trying to survive out here. And you think about, again, we talked about SMEs, self-employed people, the gig economy. Those people are, they're really out there hustling. They are worried about basic bread and butter issues. They might not necessarily have the resources, the time, the bandwidth, and with as much technology as we have access to nowadays, it's imperative that we make it easier for them to do what they need to do. We've done it in almost every other industry in the world. It's time that it shows up here. I am conscious of time, and I just want to maybe take a moment just to talk a bit about our experience sort of in the B2B space. We're sort of like a B2B2C company, because we've built it for the end user, but obviously we go through service providers and brokerage houses to get to them. And some of those discussions we've had around, this replicates what we're doing, it'll compete with our strategy. And something we've both said several times is that Shopify and Amazon are both doing very well.
Well, exactly. I mean, and as I alluded to earlier, you need to have your website, you need to be able to put it out there, let people come and get your stuff. I mean, that's obvious, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the need to have a website started in the 90s, and then, it kind of went from there. You have to have one. But that shouldn't be the only platform people can get your stuff. You kind of you're locking yourselves out of all sorts of different markets by being that internally focused. And a lot of those systems, even with some of the guys we've worked with over time, tend to be so internal facing that the member experience just hasn't been looked at. It might make the back end job easier because the data is getting through better than it ever has in the last 5 or 10 years. Great, I get that. But you've made the member experience so difficult, or you've created work for your employer groups that they never used to have before. And it's almost like that you're too difficult to do business with thing.
Yeah.
You've got to look at that as well. It's not just about people buying stuff straight from you and getting everything in the way and shape and form that you're used to. You've got to put yourself out there, and that in itself generates trust.
Yeah, definitely. I am cognizant that brokers are probably wondering what's in it for us. And, point you made earlier is that we have thought about all of the I guess, actors, stakeholders in the value chain, the service providers, the brokerage houses, but our focus is the end user. And something that, we know that we won't be replacing financial advisors, we won't be replacing brokerage houses, and we don't want to. We just want them to focus on their core business, which is not admin. It's not paperwork. It's
exactly.
not chasing up HR and finance people. And maybe you can share a bit about some of the partnerships we've developed and how we're building out also products and services in addition to the core offering to support these brokers.
Well, they are quite key. They too have relationships in larger corporates and that type of thing, which, I mean, from a selfish Ovation perspective, great for us to get access to the scale and what have you. But exactly what you said is like, what's in it for the broker? Well, the obvious stuff is, you want to look good. Your members can do all sorts of stuff with you. Yes, you can reduce your admin. So the ability to do things more consistently, more transparently, actually have direct access to your members and vice versa is now there. You can do that. It's all available at the touch of a button. But I also think, we've elevated a broker, if you'd like to say that, from just a link in the chain to an actual member as well. Their experience on Ovation is also important to us. So much so that we're building out additional tooling for them, some elements of a CRM, some elements of tools that they may require to dispense advice, because the one thing we're never going to get away from, and this is what you were saying earlier, is, you know, the brokers are there, they're not going anywhere. The need for good advice is always going to be there.
Yeah.
You know, or it's not even necessarily the need. It might just be a case of convenience. I do not want to have to do this myself. I am going to pay Kutsai to do it. End of story. That need doesn't go away. The same as it doesn't go away for a lawyer or an accountant or the rest of it. You will pay for those services if you want them. It's that simple. So a broker to us is gaining in terms of functionality on Ovation, where we're doing, you know, plan comparisons and all sorts of cool things to help them also do things much better, much quicker, much more transparent, and really be able to elevate the conversation they're having with their customers, and show their customers a little bit more innovation and stuff in the broking space.
Okay, great. And I think, you know, one of the things that's been quite exciting is also the ability to enhance the lead generation capabilities, which is a massive value add for brokers, for them to understand products much better. And you look at some of the regulatory changes that are taking place across the world, and they'll make their way to our shores very soon. And I think that also will require brokers to think about their position in the industry and how much time they spend on actual financial advice versus everything else that takes up their time. And I mean, so from our discussions, talking to people even looking to expand their business to other territories, they're not looking to set up 100-man teams or 50-man teams and have big offices. They want a digital first, to build digital first brokerage houses with much lower staff numbers and a lot more efficient. And it's been quite exciting also pitching to people who run ops and admin for some of the big service providers, because they get very excited about this because they realize that
they do.
Your auditing is a lot clearer, the costs associated with reconciling things all the time. And so I think the opportunity for brokers is super, super exciting. But we've said a lot of things today, but I think, you know, proof is in the pudding, and people probably want to see or get a taste of what it looks like. Obviously, people are free to reach out to us for a full demo, but it'd be great if you could just share your screen and show us some of the functionality with Ovation.
Yeah, sure. So let me quickly find it here. So let me know when you can see my screen.
Yes, there we go.
Okay. So there's quite a few elements to Ovation, but I'm going to start here, where, you know, there's obviously a lot of interaction between us, in this example, a corporate company, and perhaps their broker, where we collect a lot of information around their stack. So what products do you have, or what products do you offer? What flexibility do you offer? How much cost do you cover? Do you subsidize? Don't you? You know, that type of stuff. And with all of that work being done, the user gets an invitation and ends up on a screen similar to this. On the left-hand side here, we have something we call the total reward statement. So this is a point-in-time view for the member of what benefits he actually has with his company, all the different pieces that make it up, and special mention down here of anything that's subsidized by his company. You know, and that could be we pay for a minimum level of group life, or we subsidize a minimum level of PHI, or we pay for your group life. Now, why that's so important to some of our clients is, you know, we've actually had scenarios where an employee might leave for another 50 grand a year, only to get to his new role and find out, well, now he's earning less, and he's in a different tax bracket, because he didn't take into consideration the fact that some of these benefits were actually being, you know, looked after for him, and hardly comparable, etc. So it's a great opportunity for a company to actually show that value here. On the right-hand side would be the personalized view that this member has of benefits that he's able to access through his portal. Now, why I say it that way is because it's not necessarily only the benefits that the company has an arrangement with the provider or the broker for. It could be other voluntary benefits, you know, like gap cover that the member pays for directly from their bank account. But the point is, if the company agrees, we can put that here, and you can actually access those benefits from here and provide more choice and selection and flexibility to those members. Again, so on the right-hand side is that. Eligibility for us is quite complex in terms of the different facets. So it's as long as it is deep, basically. So everything that you can see on the right-hand side, this member is eligible for, but even the available options in these drop-down boxes are configured via our eligibility rules. You'll notice it's updating automatically with the employer pays X, you pay Y. So you get an immediate view of what that might mean for you in terms of your affordability. And if you choose to take this benefit, there's some things that you need to agree to, etc. Underwriting terms in some cases, T's and C's 9 times out of 10, and then we save that away. These instructions then get packaged up, dropped off at the provider, and all that information flows back now in terms of the state of your policy, if there's free cover limits that will apply until underwriting is done, all that type of good stuff. But the communication happens through the platform and in one place behind one login. Benefits can also be, instead of straight through, they could just be for interest's sake, like here's a study loan, this is how to access it. These are the charities that we support. It could even be, show your disc to get into the office across the road and you get R2 off coffee, whatever. So it's not just about stuff that works straight through or some sort of risk value or monetary value. It could also just be things that the company would like to display to their employees in terms of what they've put together as a package that you might find of benefit. On the pension side, we have a whole onboarding process, which, as you can imagine, goes everything from choosing your contributions. We take you through a bit of a risk analysis or a risk questionnaire to ascertain your attitude towards risk. And then you choose to put your money in your funds or pick your portfolios in the case of an umbrella scheme. But ultimately, you'll end up on a screen such as this one, where we've got this is an RA. These are the funds this demo guy's invested in, the returns that he's actually seeing on his policy to date. We've got some really cool machine learning that we inject into the system all the time. This piece specifically is about other funds within your scheme that are available to you, could be performing better. This is to answer a requirement out of the UK where people are being dumped into the default fund due to auto enrollment, but no one ever makes a switch. But it's because there's no communication. There's nothing being pushed to them to say, you could be doing better than the cash fund. Why don't you come and have a look at the following? Details about the contributions and stuff is at the bottom here. And then we surface all of the growth, the contributions, the valuations and stuff on graphs for the member to actually have a look at here. In the middle, we have like a total of his savings to date. We project that to what it could mean in terms of an income. Obviously, depending on the provider and the products involved, annuity rates and all that type of stuff are injectable from us. He can add different schemes that he may have from elsewhere, previous employers, all that type of thing to actually add to this pot. We then project that to scheme retirement age. We obviously call out some of the assumptions we're making to reach some of these values. And there's a nice little counter there in terms of paychecks, in terms of, how many more paychecks you actually have to achieve your goals. Progress bar along the top here to give you an idea of how you're doing in terms of your savings. Like, are you going to reach your retirement goals, which you would have pre-set up for yourself? And then to help you with that, we've got a tool like the Modeler, where you can actually come and play with a bunch of scenarios. It's fully interactive and will be pre-populated with any information that you've given us on the platform. You might want to play with a scenario where you want to retire early. Turns out you'll never be able to do that. You want to contribute more. And then you'll clearly never be able to afford a lump sum, etc., etc. So you get to play with all these levers. You get to play with some of the assumptions if allowed by your product provider and broker. And then you just basically get to learn more about how these savings work, how you can maximize your potential retirement income. There's a lot of education pieces around Ovation where we'll help you in terms of this is what this means, this is what this product means, this is how this product compares to that product and why we chose this product, that type of stuff. It's all over the application and contextual for the member. I didn't want to spend too much time on this, as I'd like to speak to people who would like to see more, but most of the functionality you would expect from a platform like this exists. Switching and redirecting, changing contributions, watch lists in terms of watching growth of funds that you may or may not be interested in, et cetera, et cetera. Cool.
Fantastic. Okay, that's been a nice taste. There's obviously a lot more functionality that we're happy to show in a demo. But at this point, I think let's open for questions from the audience, and we'll take it from there. Thank you very much, Calvin.
Awesome. Thanks, Kutsai.
Great.